Before we start, I want to genuinely say thank you to all of the comments left about this. It really inspired me to get up, stop putting it off, and get this thing done. Imagine going 3 months without a Kaizo video. This kingdom needs no introduction. This is gonna be quite the time, but I'm ready for it. So we're gonna dump our stack of moons and build it up once again. We are now at 779. That's a pretty cool number, and we unlocked it a long time ago, but it's finally time to do it. We are going to Dark Side, the place of unchartedness and where a lot of death is a foregone conclusion. In fact, it starts right away because there's not even a wire up here to use. At least this isn't a super difficult jump or anything because that would have been a nightmare. If you can just get far enough to go over the first death barrier, then you should be good. It's even possible to make it without throwing Cappy at all. Now, usually once here, I would prepare myself for the brutal gauntlet by grabbing this here life apart, but it doesn't exist anymore. Actually, literally every other stem in these piles has a coin on it, and they don't even do that for this one. Cappy just doesn't even spin on it now. It's like it's taunting you, saying, have fun with no extra hits. Alright, but enough stalling. Let's see how this goes. So, we go into the first room with Topper, and there's a pretty clear change with a lot of spinning circles to deal with as you hit him. These things are fast as heck, dude, and I'm wondering if this would cause a motion sickness. Your jumping is all thrown off from this, and it's way harder to get any hits on him. Although there is one good spot here, and it's the dead middle. That part does not spin, so it becomes clear pretty quickly that if you can get Topper in there, then you can get a much easier hit on him. Although actually getting him into that area is easier said than done, and it's kind of just up to luck if that actually happens, and if you can survive long enough with all the chaos that's happening around you. It gets pretty crazy in this arena, but somehow the luck actually did come my way, and I got Topper into that middle portion. Then, once he was dizzy from doing his spin attack, I could just go over and knock all the hats off in a row and get that last bounce on him. Sure, I might have gotten past this first try, but I was not excited yet because there's still 4 more of these things. Next up is Harriet, which starts by showing you these tall stacks of Goombas, which seems pretty pointless since the bombs just take all of them out, but hey, you get a bunch of coins for it, and that's just the gimmick. She throws bombs, and there's more bombs to dodge. Not so bad though, since there's a clear safe spot right here in the front where you first enter, so it would go good if I could actually hit the small bombs at the right angle. Not so good when you can't accomplish that, and the bigger ones come in to kill you, even though they don't even touch you. So now I have to start over and do the whole Topper fight again, which I certainly was not looking forward to. This time, I didn't get as lucky and ruined my perfect record, but the next try, I think I was starting to get this whole thing down and actually started pulling this off where Topper spins in the middle. It becomes too much to handle if he spins while spinning on the floor, but if he just stops in the middle and you get a hit like this, it's perfect. And now I could try Harriet again, and this time, I didn't play like an absolute idiot and actually knocked back the blue bombs correctly. It still wasn't easy because I had to constantly be on alert for stray bombs bouncing off Harriet and coming for me, which happened quite a bit at the end, but I was able to defeat her with 1 hit point left and did not lose it after getting to the next door, thank goodness. So now we can see the next one and answer the $1 million question. Is Skewer finally a hard boss? Well, yes. No joke, I think these guys actually crack the code. I mean, just look at how all these platforms move. You could not make something more janky if you tried. Also, I'm convinced that they increase his movement speed because he walks at you with determination. I did almost get him on my first try because I got 2 hits, and I wanted to stay on the edge during this part to get away from that spitting poison, but I ended up clipping through the platforms and going underneath. And wouldn't you guess, right as I jump up, there he is, right on top of me. Look, if you die at all on Skewer, that fight is harder than it's ever been. Somehow, the very next try, I didn't screw up at all and cleared everything on my way up. And then I learned the better strat for this. Stand on the corner, which is far away enough from the poison, but not in a spot where you'll fall and clip through stuff. Then once he starts coming after you, move to the side and be ready for him to quickly walk over. Jumping Jumping is insanely hard here because depending on the timing, you either go way too high or way too low. Perfect does not exist right now. You just have to hope he's in the right spot when you come down, and surprisingly, I actually got it. All right, one more bunny left to fight, and it's Rango. Funny enough, this is actually the simplest change of them all because now the floor is lava, or spiky in this case, and they do stay up the whole time. All you gotta do is stay in the air, and that's perfect for me because I have a strat to defeat Rango while staying in the air the whole time. But in all the excitement, I let the pressure get to me, and I missed an input, so I died. Great, now I gotta do the whole thing over again. And of course, now is when my death spiral starts. This was the point where I could see that Topper was undoubtedly the hardest of them all because of how many times I had to go through him. At this point, I died on him so many more times, and it took about half an hour before I could continue making progress. It seemed the overall verdict was that after this, Harriet was pretty easy, since I could get past her as long as I was paying attention to everything rolling at me, but Spewer was absolutely the next hardest because it feels unpredictable where he's gonna end up, but already it did feel like I had all of the information I needed. So despite getting frustrated on having to do these fights multiple times over, I had a surge of confidence for thinking this wouldn't take me an entire day to finish. So before I knew it, I had done exactly what I had to do, and I got past Spewer again. And now that I was ready, I knew I could get past Rango because I came up with another quick kill that can be used in Moon Gravity. I've been doing it for years at this point, and weirdly enough, I don't think I've actually seen anyone else do it. But if you go over to Rango and stomp his head, then cap throw and ground pound to stall, you can land on top of his hat, then just let yourself bounce and float back down for a perfectly timed hit, then rinse and repeat one more time to hit the hat again and get that last hit. Everything lines up just right, and you never have to touch the ground, which is very convenient for right now. So that's all the Brutal's done. And if you can believe it, because I sure couldn't, they actually had mercy and left that heart there for you to stock up before the final mech fight. Captain Toad is also still there, which could be used to refill our health all the way, although I thought I would see what the fight was all about first. I could hear things exploding before going in the pipe, and that was confirmed once going up. Also, once the mech drops in and that cutscene plays, the Brutals aren't really where they're supposed to be in those shots. It kind of tells me that it must be bigger than it was before. Yep, look at that. It's got a larger head with much longer and thinner legs. See, this is why you don't skip leg day, people. Regardless of the new build, the Moon Gravity is still here, and that honestly makes this fight super easy to cheese no matter what. It's relatively easy to jump up and start ground pounding those bubbles, and the bombs being fired can't hurt us while up here, but it was scary when I missed and fell back down, so I had to jump back up basically the same way I did before, and we could get back to business taking everything out. Being way above the giant Robo Brood and taking out that last bunny feels great after that whole gauntlet. I was very fearful of this, but you know what? We got through it all in just under an hour. I think I'm feeling pretty good now, so you know what? I'm gonna keep this king outfit on as we continue. But now that the multi-moon has been collected, 6 sub-areas have opened up, and they are not gonna be cakewalks. Let's start with the closest one behind the Odyssey, which is Capulus. And inside, we see that there's a nut to deal with, but I can't get it wet, so we'll actually have to platform. I tried a few times doing some weird jumps to get across these platforms, but it was never gonna work without a bit of speed to it. Then I remembered you could long jump and pick up the nut right after to do this triple jump, followed by a throw and a dive to get over there. That was just the warm-up part of the level, but we do get a checkpoint here, which I appreciate. And now we need some more platforms to get further, and there's 2 sides to do. I started by going to the right, and this platform surprised me when it started moving. And what also surprised me is just after, because apparently you're too tall while holding that nut over your head. But if we just throw it in the direction we're going, it should sit nicely on there as it goes safely under those walls. Then we grab it again because the platform kicks it into second gear, and there's even more stuff in the way. This wall in the middle gives almost enough space where it looks like you could stand right on the edge, but it's not quite that simple, and you kind of have to jump it. But once past, we swerve around a few more and do one more high jump to get over this last wall. Now at the end of this section, we can finally plant this nut and climb the vine to find a P-switch. Hitting this, it takes 2 platforms from the middle and moves them into position, as we can see. But now we have to get back to the middle just by platforming. Might not have Cappy for this part, but it's really not that bad if you just take your time on all of them. And none of these jumps can be too tight. And now we have the left side to take care of, and there's a setup that looks familiar. Seems like the best way to do it is the long jump method from before, which does get us across with speed, although it occurred to me I don't want to get onto this wall. Instead, I should curve around the wall and land on the single block behind it. That feels good to pull off. From here, it looks pretty simple if we can get on the moving platforms. It's a kind of a tough jump in this state, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to throw the nut. Thankfully, just doing a double jump and vectoring as much as possible can barely make it over here. And now some pretty simple jumps up to the finish where we can grow this vine and hit the other P-switch and moving 2 other platforms into place. Only problem is, P-switches don't actually save in between deaths, which means even if we get all the way back to the start on this one, it's not over because you have to do both sides in a row. A task which was not done successfully when going back to the other side. Based on my experience, it seems like the left one is slightly harder, and I would rather start each life with the triple jump part of it. And now that I knew both sides very well, I thought it wouldn't be too bad to get back to the end on each and get those platforms in place. But I did feel the pressure building while platforming back, but it was not enough to screw me over. Now we finally have all 4 of these in place at the same time, and they lead us up to the next checkpoint in the room. So the final section has this gimmick, which is shown right here. Simply putting the seed in a pot will make the platform move. Did not get that memo right away, but doing that makes things go up. So with that in mind, there's a little basketball mini game where we have to get all 3 nuts into the pot as we go by. I failed horribly on my first try, and nothing happened. This actually looks like it would be really easy, but having to aim while moving is pretty tough. And you can't just simply hit the pot with the nut either. You actually have to get it inside. Getting all 3 of these in one attempt took some time to get right, but I was able to eventually get it and climb those stairs, except I saw 1 moon and a final pot to plant something. Confused, I stepped on this platform and got dragged away. This movement kind of worried me for a second, because I was concerned I would somehow have to do the whole room with no checkpoints. But after some thinking, I understood. As we're going through the last basketball game, we're supposed to only hit 2 shots and keep 1 nut with us. I chose to skip the middle platform and instead only got 1 and 3 into position. From there, we can triple jump and chuck the nut up this gap, then do another jump and a wall kick to get ourselves up there, and finally, take our prize to its last home. 1 final climb as we get to the peak of the room for the secret moon. And now, both of them have been completed. That was fun. I always enjoy it when you can create something basketball-like. This has been alright so far, but that might change with what I'm trying now, because silly me, I went for one of those moon pipe sub-areas. Inside, I just see the entirety of Luncheon recreated for a sub-area. Launching down to the main part puts us on a note with a timer ticking and a bunch of purple coins to collect. It's pretty clear that we have to get all of these, and it seems like this aims to recreate the purple comets from Mario Galaxy, based on the music and the fact that there's 100 of these things. So you have to travel around most of the kingdom pretty fast. I'm getting serious flashbacks to that Notes Moon that I did a while ago. At least there's a pretty clear path to get all of these coins with traveling in a straight line through the area. We go up through the beginning, around to the left side, jump up to the poles, and make our way through the town, get over this wall into the next area, cut over to the jutting crag, and work our way around. Then comes the most difficult part with this gap. There's no lava or platforms that rise up, so the only way across is to jump to the cheese. It's not so bad with a triple jump and some speed, but I mean, every second counts in a challenge like this, because the way this whole thing works is that collecting all 100 coins spawns the moon at the end, of course, but that note that we got at the beginning is significant because there's no way to avoid avoid it after being launched over. Once it's hit, the timer begins, and it gives you exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and as soon as it runs out, it just kills you. It got pretty tough with managing that jump and finding a quick lineup while running through. Then it got pretty tough at the end, especially with one below a platform. Was it better to down throw from up there or up throw from down here? The world may never know. But I got pretty close a few times here, and that timer just got me. And maybe the best way to explain this whole thing is to just let it all play out. So let's see the speedrun attempt. That felt good. I was really satisfied with that movement. But you know the rules. There's always 2 moons in every sub-area. So how can there be some kind of secret moon here? Well, the gimmick with the timer still applies because we have to find where it is before it ticks down. Although, while I was up top, I noticed that the back of the mountain was still there. Why would that be the case if there were no coins in that area? So I tried trick jumping over from this spot, which was actually kind of tough. It takes the right angle and wall jumping at just the right spot to barely get onto the small island. Then, if that jump is made, it should be a relatively simple climb to get to the top of the back of the mountain, and all the way up there is the moon that we're looking for. Alright, now we have everything in here. That's 2 sub-areas down, and we've seen what kind of things these are about now. So, I decided to go into the next moon pipe sub-area, and I was greeted with this. That would tell me there's a theme here. We've got the same concept with a timer and coins to get, but now there's 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and we're in Lost Kingdom. This is definitely harder than a Luncheon, because there's no clear paths to get through all of them. You have to go up the kingdom at certain points, go off splitting paths without being sure where anything is, and there really is no line for you to follow. So it took a lot of exploring to find all the coins and coming up with a route that would work. In fact, fact, in my exploring, I thought I should try to make the jump to get all the way to the far-off island. Seemed pretty harmless since it's not too bad to do, and turns out it was worth it because there's another slingshot. And where should this one take you? But all the way out to the poison for the secret moon. Alright, that's good. A bit of a dopamine boost before the torture begins. And I'll just say, I was here for a while. It took a lot of time to be able to remember where all 100 were and come up with a route that would get everything. Eventually, I got it down and could start trying to beat the clock, but the thing is, the timer wasn't even the biggest problem. It was just all of the poison. There's a part in the middle of this where you have to jump out to a tree far away, which is a pretty tight jump. Then you have to jump back and get inside the Captain Toad hole for a bit more. Then you have to do even more platforming in this section, and you've got something where you're gonna die a lot. I just kept messing up trying to platform across the trees or the small platforms to get across the places I needed. I always felt like I had to go fast, and all that pressure leads to falling off a lot. There were so few times the timer actually ran out because most attempts just ended like this. Even beyond that, there were some parts that were a struggle because they put coins in both cages here. One made of stone and the one that has to be broken open. And you have to keep it on screen once broken because Cappy can't get it if you turn away. There's also a pretty tight triple jump in there, which costs valuable time if messed up. But the absolute worst of it was when I thought I was in the clear, did everything right, and got to the top, only for the moon to not spawn in. I had somehow missed one after being so careful. Come to find out, it was this one on the rocks, which I had to get in between jumping on the propellers. It was frustrating to know I'd have to do all of that successfully again, and it's such a terrible feeling to know that you're playing so well and so quick, only for it to end with a dip in the poison. That's why this room was even more frustrating, and over 3 hours later, I did something to be proud of. Mark it down because we are in there. Get me the heck out of this room. Halfway done with 3 out of 6 now. I assumed the last moon pipe would also have the perps, so thought it would be best to check that off now. But I had no idea what I was in for. This room was the hardest of all 3, and it has a moon that is in contention for the hardest of the whole game. So we're going to Moon Kingdom now, and this time we have to get all the purple coins, which are in a straight line because we gotta use rocket flowers. This is gonna take some precision with the stick movements to get it all right. I do appreciate how the coins are bigger in this one to make it more fair, but it's still gonna be brutally difficult to hit all of them. But before getting into that, I wanted to look into the secret moon, although for the life of me, I couldn't find it anywhere. You can't get up to most of the areas you would normally, and you can't get up to the chapel because there's no moon gravity. I thought it was weird that part was still in place while not being utilized, but after a lot of searching, it turns out it was way out here on this platform pretty far away. Apparently, we have to grab a couple of rocket flowers from up here so we can run down to the bridge and go around the backside, then throw Cappy at just the right time to get a vault with a ton of speed and fly all the way over to the platform. You wouldn't think that you could ever make that, but anything is possible with rocket flowers, including the main moon, which we now have to do. This was insanely difficult because the lines you take for this have to be so precise. Sometimes you just run straight, but other times you have to curve around the craters and run in a circle. There's so many turns to make that can be very sharp and sometimes over hills. It's so hard to control, and it takes insane concentration to get everything over the entire kingdom. You do have 1 minute and 20 seconds before the timer runs out, which is technically less time than the others, but it's not done the same way at all. It's not like you can make up time with good movement, you just have to get everything on the path correctly. Although, what is nice is that you don't have to be perfect and get everything without slowing down a single time. You do have about 10 seconds of leeway, so you could throw Cappy to turn around and grab anything should you miss it. Do this too many times though, and there's no chance of making it. This becomes really frustrating after a while, as it becomes clear that there is no way for you to get through it other than to just keep going and going and going. I couldn't believe how long I was stuck on this one, and how hard some of these turns were. What's really tough is I had to use both the movement stick and the camera stick at the same time to get everything around the craters, and yet I kept missing the same ones over and over. It was almost predictable the amount of backtracking I had to do. A little ways in, I even started doing spin throws, which in theory would help get everything as I ran by. It worked pretty well on the first attempt, but not after that, because constantly having to set that up throws everything off. It seemed clear that I had to do it the old-fashioned way and somehow get to the end. After spending the longest time out of any room here, I finally did this. Not even kidding. I screamed so loud when I did this, my throat hurt for the rest of the day. It was that hype. That is all the coin collecting that I can handle for one day. Please let me escape this prison and do some more Capulus stuff. I was very much relieved to see something more simple here with a 2D style area. Just going left and right is fine with me. I don't have any brain power left to use. So the main mission is to the right, but if we go to the left instead, there's some platforms. But jumping to them does cause this fuzzy wall to appear, which does put the pressure on you as you go. There is no time to slow down for jumps anymore, especially when there's a high jump requiring a spin pound to get over. But if you know what to do and are ready for everything, then the parkour done to get all the way over to the end looks awesome. And we got that secret moon pretty quickly. And now for the other way along the main path. It's pretty cool to see some jumps here at the start that become much more difficult without Cappy. However, this wall jumping section is a bit rough because you need perfect timing to slip past those fuzzies, and if you hit any of them, you fall all the way down. There's even a double that it wants you to get through right after that. At least you can take your time, so it's not too bad. And what's nice is every solid platform along the way marks a checkpoint for us. The next part was quite rough because you have to jump around fuzzies while on falling platforms. If you pause for a second or grab any ledges, then you're gonna fall down. It's really all about timing with this first jump especially. I eventually found that just a normal jump would make this, and I could keep going, but how the heck do you get through this part with two walls of fuzzies and a group moving at the bottom? That part was a massive pain because if you hit anything, you are absolutely done for. I died many times here hoping something would work, but somehow I came up with this insane strat of going over the fuzzies. And if you ground pound but pause before the dive, it lines up pretty well. Then we can make it through the rest of these jumps doing something pretty similar. And then just one more stretch of platforms as we quickly try to dodge everything being thrown at us, and if somehow that is done just right, there's another checkpoint. That part was chaotic, but now it's slower pace with the flowers. And there's a pretty good pattern to follow with this, as you might be able to see now. I did screw up one time before it sunk in, but pretty much if you hit the flower while it's as high as possible, then everything lines up for you to just go over the top. It takes a bit of adjusting, but for the most part, it goes pretty smoothly. Then the last bit we have is this, where it's a long elevator. And of course, we avoid more fuzzies on the way up. Some of the obstacles in the way are pretty easy to get around, but some are just way too difficult. On the plus side, there was another checkpoint here, so we can try again with full health. And as we went up the elevator, I was suspecting there were 2 points where you had to take damage and there was no way to avoid it. The good news is, it's not too long of a ride up, and since we could start with the full 3 hits, those 2 guaranteed ones leave us with just enough to get to the end and get ourselves the main moon. That felt great, and it hardly took any time compared to the last 4. And now just 1 room left. Another Capulus, and we have a whole new gimmick, in this game anyway, because it's switching platforms, like from 3D World. Except now there's a cycle of 4, and they go much faster. A bit of a warm-up at the start, just to get a feel for it, but it gets much harder. Honestly, this second bit is probably the hardest of the whole thing, simply because of the layout of these. It goes 1, 2, and then a backflip up to the 3rd, only to skip a cycle and have the next 2 at the same time. This needed some planning to get through. At first, I thought it would be good to go back down to the previous platform and then jump back up to the second platform in the row to get a bit further. It took a bit of tries for that to work at all, but even when it did work, I had nowhere near enough time to jump across the rest to the next safe zone. And you can't stall in the air long enough for all 4 cycles to come around again to catch you. You had to go so fast across the last few platforms, but I couldn't figure out how to get enough speed. After a few minutes of trying this and getting nowhere, I thought something else could be more effective and much faster. But just jump right for the second platform while stalling in the air a bit. If done right, you can almost go through it and land on top just as it appears. You do still have to platform pretty much perfectly after that, and you have mere frames to hit that last one. But you can't jump too early because then you won't make it to safe ground. But if everything is done just right and you move with lots of speed, you can get get that jump and barely screech onto that next solid piece, and we've got another checkpoint. That part was short and not sweet. And next up is this gap. It looks like there's more to it, but also easier to follow. It starts with 4 platforms that all appear in a row, but there's also a huge gap at the start that requires more time. So this is where we utilize our spin jumping technique. You can't stall in the air long enough for 4 switches, but by doing this, you can be in the air just enough for 3. So if done right, you can get on the edge of here much faster and have enough time to long jump to the 4th one. Now what? Well, at this point, it seems doing side flips is the move since we have to quickly turn and dive. Following that up with a jump to get up here, and then a row of 4 that does not go in order at all. It seems this goes in a pattern of 1, 3, 2, 4, if that makes sense, so another spin jump is very useful. And then it took me a lot of tries to actually stick the landing on this last part because I couldn't even register what was happening for most of it. Also, I kept diving over this one like an idiot. It turns out that in these kind of places, it's best to slow it down just a bit and pause in the air to give everything time, and you can get to the end a lot more smoothly. One last bit before that moon, and this is definitely the longest stretch of them all, and it also took the longest. At first, I didn't know exactly what to expect, but it becomes clear that everything goes in order here. Nothing's too confusing because everything in front of you will eventually turn on if you time it right. You just have to go pretty fast and not grab the ledge of anything because then you're screwed. Some backflips do have to be done to climb some steps, which isn't so bad, but then comes the worst part with this massive grid of platforms you somehow have to go through. It's almost impossible to see where anything is because of the camera and how the platforms are a little transparent. There had to be some kind of pattern here, but I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. I didn't know if I should try to turn the camera or if I should just keep jumping at stuff and hoping it would work eventually. It was just way too easy to fall between the cracks of all these, so it's not like that was ever gonna work. Eventually, I did figure out that when you're on a platform here, the next one ahead and one up should appear under you if you stall just a bit. So if you can keep the rhythm, you can get into a flow state. But even knowing that, I continued to bonk on here over and over again. You might not think this would take so long, but it took me 30 minutes to get past this last section. It didn't even feel like that in the moment because it's all so fast-paced. And of course, after finally clearing that huge grid, the pressure hits on those last few jumps. The very confusing nature on this part messed me up more than a few times. What's with that switch up on the last 4 there? Okay, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, then 2, 1, 3, 4. Once you have all that information and can lock in with super quick hands, it is possible to jump through the entire grid one more time and make it onto those last platforms and follow the pattern just right to land on the edge and make one final jump to get that moon. You know, that was tough, but it was definitely my favorite out of all 6 rooms. And the last moon makes it even better since we get a nice elevator to finish it. Just a bunch of platforms right on top of each other, which we can jump up in such a cool and satisfying way. You don't see things that line up that good all the time. Okay, all rooms finally done. Oh, and before I forget, I should go back up and talk to Captain Toad now. Didn't mean to leave you hanging, buddy, but I couldn't leave without any visit to you. That is technically all we can do in the kingdom itself, but if you know this game well, then you remember there are still 10 moons left, in the form of hint arts, and now we get to see a lot more pictures made by the community. You know, as of late, I've been doing a lot of hint art creating myself, but I would really love to switch it up and do some hint art solving now, so I'm really excited to see all these. And as we go back through the kingdoms to find all these, I thought it would be good to also finish up everything else in the game that we didn't get to. That's why I made a little pit stop in the dino room, just to grind for enough coins to buy all the remaining outfits in the shop. A side note, the skeleton outfit is now 2,000 coins. I really appreciate that, guys. Another instance of fixing something from the main game. It saved me many more minutes of not having to max out the coin counter for one item. But here we go, we're in Cascade, and I've got all the dark side hint arts ready to go. go, as well as the hint arts from later kingdoms yet to be collected. First one is this guy right here, which I think seems pretty clear what it's looking for. Should just have to go into the skull that looks down on the kingdom, and as I've learned, we can do a spin pound in this little area to make that pop out. Perfect, we have collected number 1, and this was made by Kale. I think the best way to go through all these is just to go in order down the list of kingdoms. So next up, we're gonna go to Sand. We actually don't have any from Darkside here, but there are 2 from other kingdoms yet to be collected. The first would be this one from Wooded Kingdom. It seems like it makes sense. Each group of wires represents a certain spot in the kingdom, like how there's 4 down here showing all the ones in the town. We ride this line all the way up the tower where there's 2 next to each other, up to the pyramid, and to the left there's another, eventually leading down to a cross path with a couple more places to go, but that means the moon should be right here on this spot. Nice! Look at that, yet another one made by Kale. And then the next one to find is this from Bowser's. This one makes a lot of sense. It's bringing back memories from when I climbed this tower on my first playthrough, which seems so freaking long ago. And now that there's no ice, it's much easier to stand there and ground pound. And this one was made by Lex. You know, if only climbing up the whole thing really was this easy on the first visit. And next, we're going to Lake, and I had some business to finish here with these Style Sisters. It didn't have the outfits before, but now we have bought everything. So the one in pink wants to meet Luigi, who is the superior brother, based. The one in silver, fittingly, is still into pirates and wants to see some gold. We got that. And the one in blue wants to meet Bowser, so we'll put on his wedding suit and greet ourselves. And then there's also a Darkside hint art that looks like this. It took me a minute to understand, but then I thought of the start of this area and saw it lines up just right with this angle. So we can find that moon right over here by the edge. Nice, got the next one, also made by Kale. Finally, we've cleared everything in this place after so much time. The next one to find is in Cloud, and this is what it looks like. When I first saw it, I had no idea what I was looking at, and then I got to the kingdom, and it seemed to make sense. There are some clouds that make circle shadows on the ground, and it looks like there's 7 in the air that make a pattern just like this. And I suppose the compass means I have to be facing north, but also turn the camera so he's looking at the bottom of the screen. Although, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out where this thing ended up, because it wasn't on the cloud, and it wasn't on the ground in the middle of the other 2. There's something weird going on with this one. I thought to myself, maybe I did something wrong and was looking at it upside down, so I checked everything on the other cloud, but still, that moon was not popping out. I tried standing directly in the middle of these 2 shadows and even ground pounding on every single spot in these clouds. I spent over 10 minutes here and could not find it, until I was like, alright, I'm gonna jump over the cloud and ground pound directly where that cloud is. And apparently, that was the answer, because it was a little bit off from the center of those other 2. Red Sleigh, you had me there for a bit. Hopefully the others aren't as confusing. The one in Lost looks like this, and it seems like I just have to find the perfect spot. It seemed clear that I had to find the right area with the perfect shape of dirt. Everywhere I searched, it seemed to have too big of a spot where nothing looked quite right, until eventually I searched the back of here and found this spot. The dirt was actually the checkpoint mound, and that explains the cutoff at the top. So we got our moon right about here. Nice, got another one from Lex. Oh, and I almost forgot about this one, originally from Snow Kingdom. We can see all of the ground pound platforms with the mysterious symbol on it. So if we look at it from this angle, we can see which part of it is the Klepto platform, in front of the stone cage, and the staircase initially leading up. And based on the moon in the picture, it should be right about in the middle of these 2. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. And wouldn't you guess, another piece of art made by Kale. Metro is where we need to go now, and there's also 2 to get. The first one would be this, that leads here from Seaside. So I saw this, and I was convinced that it would be in the band room in the corner, but unfortunately I was wrong about that, and I couldn't find it. I was so sure that it had to be in this room, and I had to piece together the clue, but I spent a while ground pounding what felt like every pixel in here and nothing. I even went back into the festival and completed this whole thing again, which was not easy, by the way, and tried ground pounding some spots around these people. It came up absolutely empty with that one. However, there was another dark side art that also leads here, and it actually does involve the festival since it makes you ground pound on the top of this structure. I guess that means in the normal kingdom, the ground pound spot is always there, but it's out of reach and you can only get to it by doing this. So we'll take this one from Kale and we'll leave the other one here, but come back to it. Let's finish up the rest of the dark sides. Snow was interesting because it looks like this. Honestly, this one feels a little unfair because usually it's down in the race room, but this picture would show that it's outside and on the walls. So what you're supposed to do is find that shape of lines on the wall and uncapture the blowy Joey to ground pound right there. It's a pretty precise spot, and the fact that you can't stand there makes it really rough. That one took a little bit to find, and we get yet another from Kale. I guess they were just in charge of all these. We have another double over in Seaside because the one in Luncheon looks like this, and I felt pretty stupid on this one. I was so convinced that this would be on the goblet at the base of it, simply because of the design. You see all the patterns that are on this thing? It seemed perfectly logical that the X on the leaf-looking piece would either be on this part of it or this part at the bottom, and it was driving me crazy that I couldn't find it. I even got on top of the goblet again, and the only way to do that is by completing this timer challenge and sticking that landing without Cappy. Even ground pounding there accomplished nothing. I kept telling myself it had to be here because there's no other spot with this design. And then I thought, wait, this white spot on the ground looks remarkably similar to the place over by the volleyball where the seeds usually grow. I'm not used to this platform being cleared off, so I never picked up on it, but the picture is flat, so of course this is the design I want. Man, how does Red Soleil keep fooling me with these? Back to the ones from Dark, and for some reason, this just clicked for me. Maybe it's because I've seen a lot about min caps, but there's this wall, and there's two ledges that you can stand on and jump between to scale the whole thing. So with the moon placed where it is, it's showing that it should be right here on the top of this one. Brilliantly done there, Jimmy and Kale. Just a couple more left, and these ones did not cause me as much of a headache. In Luncheon, we had this picture to look at, which luckily I realized where that pointed. The way the cave works is that it's still technically connected to the main kingdom, so the hint art could be put inside of here. So it makes sense for it to be right at the end with this layout. We got the story moon platform and the 4 lanterns, so we can find our prize as long as we put out the fire to give just enough time. And surprise, surprise, it was made by Kale. Alright, and then we have a ruined, which involves this picture, and I knew exactly where that would be. But the challenge is not finding it, it's just getting to it. And you know what? I was gonna do the first half of this climb to get there again, and then I kept floundering around on these seesaws forever and was reminded of how insane these jumps are. At this point, I feel like I've been through enough torture with this game, and I already did the whole thing again to get the checkpoint at the top, so I'm just gonna warp up and go down the climb. Of course, this is a much easier way to get to the Cap Kingdom platform, and we see the exact design in the picture. So we're gonna take our prize right in the middle of all of it. Thank you, SMO Joy-Con, for making me do that one more time. And the last one to find is back in Mushroom Kingdom. This is the picture shown, and I don't think this is hard to figure out, but if anything, that just shows how beautiful this drawing is. Of course, we just warp up to Yoshi's house, and we find it right there in the fireplace. Seriously, Game Nerd, love the style on this picture. It looks great. Alright, so that's almost every hint art in the game, but what about everything else that needs to be done in Mushroom? There's still 3 more stars that have appeared here, like the tourist, who tries to hide behind this wall and is now looking at a non-existent driver. There's Peach, making her final stop through all the kingdoms in the game and who has invited so many other people to the castle. And then we have the final Hat and Seek spot, which is on this toad and is a little hard to talk to. You have to face them with this exact camera angle to get the eyes to appear and be able to start talking. That's one way to make it more difficult. And then there's every Toadette Moon to pick up, the remaining 60, which we grab one by one by one. None of the achievements are actually changed, but it is all made harder based on on the nature of the game. Although we're definitely not going to have to do any jump or cap farming because there's an insane amount of those from all this work that's been done. After everything has been accomplished, we have cleared all the moons here and just have to make a couple more stops. The tourist finishing their round-the-world trip and going back home to sand in this spot. Crazy how long ago we first saw them. And then we just need the last hint art that's somewhere in Metro. I was still so stuck on the idea that it had to be in the band room because of the logic the other hint arts have. It had to be in the main kingdom, and this room is connected to that since it just warps you to a box that's placed out in the void. I also noticed in the bottom left that there was a guy with a head but no body, and I thought that was representing the hat ghost, and then I had to follow the other NPCs to find the spot. I can't even tell if that was a big brain play or just laziness. Maybe some of you could figure it out by looking at it, but I couldn't. I needed some kind of clue, and I knew this was created by my friend Zach207, so I actually messaged him and asked what was up with it. And what he told me was that yes, it is in a sub area, but not necessarily in the band room. It actually does not have to be linked to the main kingdom. Kind of. But the other thing he said was the lighting and it being brighter at the top was an intentional choice. So I started to check every sub area, and there's a whole bunch of them here. There's the movie theater room, which has a bunch of people, but nothing in the corner there. I also tried checking behind the desks of the shop, but it wasn't next to the people in there. I really had to think, what room has a bunch of people? And then the light bulb just flicked. The people room. Duh. Now it was making sense. The people are facing forward here, so it must be down at this end. There's the New Donk City sign on the parasol above, and the lighting is from the bright box in the back, which means it has to be somewhere like in this spot, maybe a bit more outside, right around this spot on the floor. Bingo. I probably should have pieced that together way sooner, but I finally got it after so much time. And another interesting thing Zach told me was that this moon is actually available from the first visit in Metro. Because this area is not connected to the main kingdom, there's no way to actually link the moon to the hint art like in vanilla. And this is the only moon in Kaizo that works like that. Maybe I can say that's why it was so difficult for me, but it has been done, and that's the last individual moon. We've seen everything. We've finished every challenge. We've done all there is to do, gotten all the harder purple coins, every moved checkpoint, and every changed moon in the game for a grand total of 877. And you know what that means. There's just one multi-moon and one final challenge left to complete. Darker Side is the last thing on our list, the hardest challenge Super Mario Odyssey has ever had to offer. But that will have to wait one more time for the last video in this series.